So we have the statement, Changes to Winter Fuel Payments 2025, and I call the Minister. Torsten Bell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 21st of May, the Prime Minister told this House that the government wants to extend eligibility for winter fuel payments to a wider range of pensioners in England and Wales. Today, we are setting out how this will happen for the coming winter and the years ahead. This will provide certainty for pensioners and ensure payments can be made swiftly and automatically, which is our priority. I hope this statement will also answer many of the questions honourable members have raised with me and others in recent weeks. Let me set out to the House how this system will work. All pensioners with incomes up to and including £35,000 will benefit from support, as will all those on pension credit and other income-related benefits. The payment of £200 per household or £300 per household when there is someone aged over 80 will be made to all pensioner households in England and Wales. Individual pensioners with taxable income above £35,000 will have any winter fuel payment automatically recovered via HMRC without the need for them to take any action. This will be via PAYE for the majority or in their self-assessment tax return for those that already complete one. No one will be brought into tax or into self-assessment just to repay their winter fuel payment. Those that prefer not to receive a payment can opt out of receiving it. As was previously the case before July 2024, where the household is not getting an income-related benefit and there is more than one pensioner in the household, shared payments split across the recipients will be made. This government has had to make tough decisions, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is right to means test the winter fuel payment. I thought the party opposite supported means testing the winter fuel. We'll find out in this debate shortly. We have had to make tough decisions because of the disaster left by the party opposite. But it is right to means test the winter fuel payment on grounds of fairness and fiscal sustainability. Most people accept that it makes no sense to pay hundreds of pounds to pensioners irrespective of their incomes. Those on the highest incomes do not need it, and there are many other calls on public spending. The government has, however, listened to concerns about the level of the means test. We are acting to make sure all lower-income pensioners receive support. The new individual £35,000 threshold is significantly above the income of pensioners in poverty and broadly in line with average earnings. It will mean that the vast majority, over three-quarters or 9 million pensioners, will benefit from a winter fuel payment. This change ensures that the means testing of winter fuel payments has no effect on pensioner poverty. Means testing the winter fuel payment in England and Wales, like this, will save around £450 million a year, subject to certification by the Office for Budget Responsibility, compared to the system of universal payments. It will cost around £1.25 billion in England and Wales, compared to the position last winter. Decisions about the situation in Scotland and Northern Ireland remain for their devolved administrations in the usual way. As the Prime Minister has previously set out, these are changes that will be fully funded at the next fiscal event, the autumn budget. That will ensure final costings and funding decisions come alongside the latest forecast from the OBR. We will ensure that the government's non-negotiable fiscal rules are met. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are setting out these changes before the summer to ensure more pensioners receive support this winter. Regulations will be laid in the coming months to ensure the payments are made, and tax changes will be legislated for in the Finance Bill. I want to spell out today clearly, pensioners do not need to do anything. Winter fuel payments will be paid automatically this winter to all pensioners who receive the state pension, pension credit, or anyone who has previously received a winter fuel payment. Similarly, payments will be recovered automatically through the tax system for those with an income over £35,000. Pensioners will also continue to receive wider support. Our pension credit take-up campaign has seen an almost 60,000 awards made. I want to thank the honourable members on both sides of this House, local authorities and charities for their work on that campaign. Over 12 million pensioners right across the UK are also benefiting from the triple lock. The full new state pension is set to increase by up to £1,900 a year over this Parliament as a result. Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend that support for pensioners and this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary say hello, Waitley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I feel for the honourable gentleman sent here today by his bosses to complete what must be the most humiliating climb down a government has ever faced in its first year in office. For nearly a year, the Conservatives have campaigned against this cut. And for nearly a year, they have tried to hold out. Just 4 weeks ago, I stood here and I asked him how long this tone-deaf final stand could go on for. Loyally, he held the line. He defended the cut one final time. He said their plan for pensioners was right on track. Well, today, Madam Deputy Speaker, he has been sent to end that courageous last stand. And, unless it's coming next, he has been sent without the one thing that pensioners up and down the country deserve: an apology. Yeah. Let's be clear. The government made a choice to cut the winter fuel payment. It is outrageous to claim that the economy has somehow improved from the day they made the cut, and they know it. In fact, by almost every metric, the opposite is true. Inflation was at the 2% target. Now it's 1.5 points higher. 150,000 more people are unemployed. Growth forecasts have been slashed in half by the OBR. And in the meantime, they've gone to town with the country's credit card. Borrowing is up. Debt is up. Who is the Chancellor trying to fool when she says she can suddenly afford this when before she couldn't? The fact is, last winter, she gave pensioners fuel money to the unions. Now she realises how unpopular that was. So she's pretending everything has changed. Perhaps the most surprising thing is she thinks anyone is taken in. 50,000 pensioners plunged into poverty this year, according to their own analysis. 100,000 extra pensioners ended up in A&E this winter. Their mistake has hurt people, and it is cowardly not to own up to it. Just like the government's PIP reforms, there were no consultations, no proper assessments, just a self-righteous insistence that what they're doing should not be questioned. Yeah. Certainly, no thought for those actually affected, or concern for the anxiety that their government by press release is causing. This is what happens when a government comes into office with no plan and no principles, no idea what they want to achieve, and no idea how to achieve it. They just bumble from one mistake to another, breaking promise after promise. Did they think they could just try out new policies like you try a new mattress? Unwrap it, see how it feels, sleep on it for a while, but if it causes a political backache, send it back. This rushed reversal raises as many questions as it answers. It's clear that when the Prime Minister stood up and made his big U-turn announcement in PMQs, he had no plan and no idea how he was going to pay for it. It's a totally unfunded spending commitment. Where is the 1.25 billion needed to pay for this U-turn coming from? I note that the Minister has kicked that can down the road until the budget. They claim it won't permanently add to borrowing. So does this mean it will permanently add to taxation? And on the plan itself, is this really the best system of means testing they could come up with? Is he sure they have thought it through? Or is this going to unravel too? What happens if a pensioner earns over £35,000 a year through non-taxable income? Are they going to have to register for self-assessment and start filling out a tax return in their 80s or 90s? But if not, why should someone earning taxed income, who didn't, be disadvantaged? Is it fair that a millionaire pensioner and their spouse might receive a payment, but two people earning £36,000 won't? And what happens if someone dies in the period between receiving the payment and having to pay it back? Are they going to go after the deceased person's relatives? And two final questions, Madam Deputy Speaker. After all this, the savings for the Treasury this coming year may be as little as £50 million. Does he think it's worth it, and will he apologise?
Yeah. Minister Bell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll deal directly with two of the questions raised because I think it is important to provide reassurance. The Honourable Lady, the Right Honourable Lady, asks about what happens with an estate of someone that is deceased, and I want to be really clear that no HMRC will never pursue any estate for the winter fuel payment alone. She also asks about the levels of savings as I set out in my statement. The savings will be £450 million a year within England and Wales, and that is very clear, and that is a significant saving. But more broadly, the Honourable Lady talks about apology. She comes here as the party of Liz Truss and lectures anybody else about apology. She comes here as the party of flatlining wages, rising debt, 200,000 increase in pensioner poverty, and asks anybody else to apologise. I've never heard such nonsense. And then for all the sound of fury, she was on her most furious today, but we've listened to pensioners, we've also listened to her just now, and I still can't tell what their policy is. It's 11 months on. From all the rhetoric and the shouting, it sounds like she might support the means testing of winter fuel payments. After all, that was the policy of her leader. Before, her leader also supported means testing the entire state pension in one of her bolder moments. The honourable members opposite say that this isn't much comfort to pensioners, but Age UK say the exact opposite. Charity director Karen Abrahams has said this announcement is the right thing to do. Martin Lewis has said out it is a big improvement. Now we think. Well, I still. There's a lot of chuntering from the benches opposite. Maybe the backbenchers can work out what the front bench's policy is by the time they get to their feet in a few minutes' time. I have no idea what the Conservative Party's policy is whatsoever. More widely, when it comes to pensioners, this government's priorities are to raise the state pension and to rescue the NHS. The triple lock will see the state pension spending rise by £31 billion a year annually over this Parliament. £26 billion is being invested into the NHS because we inherited in England a disgraceful situation where more than 1 in 5 pensioners aged over 75 were on waiting lists. There is no excuse for that legacy of the party opposite, and neither of these progresses, raising the state pension or investing in the NHS, would be possible without the difficult decisions we have had to make on tax. Difficult decisions every party opposite has opposed. It is only this government that can provide that crucial support for pensioners, because we will do what is necessary to turn that support from rhetoric into reality.
Navandra Mishra, after which I will call Steve Darling. Navandra Mishra.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think members on both sides of the House will have had a large volume of correspondence on this matter. So can I thank the Minister for his statement? Can I also ask him if he thinks this is the fair policy change, because it's saving our public services £450 million by ensuring that the wealthiest pensioners do not continue to receive the winter fuel payment?
Lister.
Well, my honourable friend sets out the principal case for means testing of the winter fuel payment very well indeed. I don't think anybody with common sense thinks that it's right that millionaires receive hundreds of pounds from the Exchequer each year towards their winter fuel payments. I think people have recognised that for years, and it's this government that is making the tough choice to say we will no longer pay the winter fuel payment in that way.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And what our country needs is stability, and I personally fear that this is from the book of how to botch running the country, because whilst the decision was wrong last year, and the Liberal Democrats have long campaigned against these proposals, and I think it's important to acknowledge people such as Independent Age, Silver Voices and Age UK, who've all driven this change. It is the right change, but a government that wobbles like this isn't giving that stability that we need for our economy. 300,000 pensioners in Devon and Cornwall have been worried sick about these proposals, so why not implement this approach 12 months ago? There's also grave concerns around people who are single pensioners, because the comms from the government is not clear on this. Can you give some clarity about single pensioner households? Also households where a pensioner is a higher rate earner and there's also a lower rate earner in that household. How will they be treated? But finally, Can I have some assurances that the government will continue to push hard in respect of pension credit? Because for the poorest pensioners, that can offer £11,000 a year boost to their income, and that is the real way to tackle pensioner poverty in the UK.
I thank the honourable member for his comments and for his welcoming of this change. He called it the right change. He asked about different treatment of single and couple households, so I just can explain that in a bit more detail. Single households will receive the entire household winter fuel payment to the one individual, whether that's £200 or £300. If the individual's income is below £35,000, then they will keep that in full, and if the individual's income is above £35,000, then that will be recouped by HMRC unless they choose to opt out. With couples, the situation will be for those not in receiving means-tested benefits that they will be as it was before July 2024, which is split payments, half to each member of the household, and then they will be individually tested against the tax system. But I thank him for giving me the chance to clarify that, and can I entirely endorse his statement about pension credit. The reason we want to see higher rates of pension credit take-up is not because of winter fuel payment per se, because that is small relative to the financial gains that come from people who are entitled to a pension credit receiving it. So we absolutely must maintain the progress on pension credit take-up in the months and years ahead. And as I said in my statement, I do welcome the work that's been done by MPs in their constituencies and local authorities and charities in driving up those rates.
Rachel Muskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Ageing and Older People, I really do welcome the reinstatement of the winter fuel payments for 9 million pensioners. But since the announcement to remove it, the energy price cap has gone up £281. So would you have a look at the value of the winter fuel payment and perhaps turn to the industry, which over the last 5 years had profited by £207 billion, and perhaps they can make a greater contribution to help our poorest pensioners?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. She's right to raise questions about energy prices. Those are obviously issues actually for households of all ages that have been living through the cost of living crisis of recent years. If we look at what's happening with the energy price cap, the good news is obviously it will be coming down in July. I think everybody across this House would like to see it fall significantly further. But this government, though, has been taking steps already over the last 11 months to make sure that more households are getting support with energy bills. You'll have seen the consultation on the doubling of eligibility for warm homes discount. You'll have seen the work that is going on to significantly increase the spending on warm homes insulation, over £3 billion this year, and the extension of the household support fund. So right across the piece, for households of all ages, not just for pensioners, we do need to make sure this is a country where more people can afford to heat their homes.
Dame Harriet Colvin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the truth is that the Chancellor made a chilling political choice last July and has now had to make a screeching U-turn following pressure from people on all sides and outside this chamber. So will the Minister take this opportunity to send an apology to all the low-income pensioners in West Worcestershire and elsewhere who had to shiver through last winter?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As I was saying, for low-income families right across the board, we do need to make sure that they are receiving the support we need. That's why we set out changes to free school meals last week. It's why we'll be coming forward with a child poverty strategy in the weeks ahead. I've already explained why the original decision was taken and set out that we have listened. But the important thing is that it is right to maintain the principle of means testing of the winter fuel payments, but to do so with a higher threshold. And as I've set out, the changes we're bringing forward today will mean that the vast majority, over 3/4 of pensioners, will receive it in future.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome my honourable friend's announcement because this news will not only bring more money to Scotland, it also demonstrates a government that listens. The winter fuel payment is devolved in Scotland as it was at the time of the original announcement. And the SNP's current policy robs poorer pensioners to fund payments for millionaires. So does my honourable friend agree that the SNP must now re-examine their own policy in light of this game-changing announcement today?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend because she's always quite right. I spoke to ministers in the devolved administrations today to set out in advance the details of this policy and to spell out, for example, to the ministers in Edinburgh, if they want to have a fairer system that means tests the winter fuel payment and the equivalent in Scotland from those on the highest incomes, then HMRC is ready to support that. But so far they have chosen not to means test a system, to have a system that is not fair to poorer pensioners.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Deputy Speaker, look, in politics all U-turns aren't always bad, and therefore this one is a welcome one from the government, as people will benefit. I simply say it would be helpful if you got up and said we made a mistake, but we're going to put it right. But that, by the by, is fair. I just want to ask him something else, because there are a group of people who are still suffering, and I've had many letters and communications, I'm sure many around the House have. Something like 750,000 pensioners who are eligible for pension credit and therefore, theoretically, winter fuel, put in for the winter fuel and have not received a single penny for last winter. Will he now commit at the dispatch box, whatever else the changes are, he will see this righted and they will receive the money that they should have had during the winter?
Minister.
I thank the right honourable member for that comment. I mean, he's right to highlight this question of low take-up of pension credit. That's what the 700,000 figure he's referring to. Unfortunately, that was true under the last government. As I say, we have seen unprecedented levels of pension credit applications over the last year because of the campaign that we and honourable members on both sides of this House have been involved in. That is very welcome indeed, but I'm absolutely agreeing with him that we need to keep momentum up on that. In terms of what we're doing in the short term, we are now writing to all new claims to housing benefit to, if we think they could be eligible for pension credit, to encourage them to apply. We're engaging in new research to look at what are the things that have worked to drive pension credit take-up, which largely looks like it is awareness of the benefit. And we are looking at better data sharing, yes, with local authorities, but also across central government departments, for example, between the Department for Worker Pensions and HMRC.
Frank McNally.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome today's announcement, and it is right that despite the horrendous financial situation that this government inherited from the party opposite, that it is reinstating the winter fuel payment for 75% of pensioners and critically targeting it, easy for me to say, at those in the most need. But following on from my honourable friend for Renfrewshire, can the Minister outline what discussions he expects to have moving forward with Scottish ministers around their universal approach to winter fuel in Scotland? Because at a time when public services in Scotland are facing significant peril, the SNP's position is to continue to give winter fuel to millionaires at a time of deep hardship for people in Scotland.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. He's right to highlight the targeting, and the level we've set, £35,000 for the means test threshold, ensures that it is well above the income levels of pensioners in poverty, and it's also around the average earnings level. On the question of policy in Scotland, I mean, an important principle of devolution is those are decisions for the Scottish Government, but they're also decisions that they will be held accountable for.
John Glenn.
Madam Deputy Speaker, over several fiscal events over 7 years, the option of removing the winter fuel payment from the wealthiest was resisted by the previous government because there wasn't seen to be an effective rationing mechanism and there were considerable presentational challenges. Can the Minister confirm that pensioners with no mortgage, significant tax wrap savings in ISAs or VCTs, but with a monthly pension of £2,500 will still be fully entitled to receive the winter fuel payment?
Minister.
Well, I always enjoy discussing technical details with my right honourable friend. I think I've set the position out very clearly in the initial statement, which is where the means test is based on taxable income of £35,000. I think that answers the right honourable member's question.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The original decision to cut winter fuel payment was the wrong decision. Today's decision is the right decision and a much fairer decision. It will mean in my constituency of Bradford East, 2,000 more pensioners, quite rightly, will now get the winter fuel payment again. Now, it's clear the government has listened So I ask them to listen again to the growing calls in this chamber and scrap their planned devastating cuts to disability support.
Minister.
I thank my right friend for his question and for his welcoming of today's policy announcement. I will continue to discuss with him all aspects of how his constituents are treated within the social security system. On the wider questions he raises, obviously the government has set out his position, and I think the position of most people in the country is that we can't continue with a position where 1 in 8 young people are out of work, or where we're seeing 1,000 people a day flowing onto personal independence payment. We need a better system focusing on supporting those that can work into work, as my right honourable friend is setting out the case. I don't think leaving the status quo as it is a position that anybody should support.
Wendy Morton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, no matter how the Minister tries to dress this up, the Chancellor made a monumental political mistake last year. And whilst I welcome the news of reinstating the payment, it's cold comfort to those pensioners who missed out last year, who faced the really difficult choices over the winter. So will he look at it again and reinstate the winter fuel payment to all those who missed out?
Minister.
Well, I mean, this is why I'm confused, because what is the position of the Conservative Party? Is it to support means testing of the winter fuel payment? Yes or no? Yes. Is it to support means testing of the winter fuel payment, or are you going to send the Shadow Chancellor out to his speech?
Order. Are you going to send? I don't think he's speaking to the chair. Minister, briefly.
As I was saying, is the Conservative Party going to send out the Shadow Chancellor to give a speech where I can't tell whether he's apologising for Liz Truss or not, and then the very next week come to this House and call for universal... if they're calling for universal winter fuel payments, then they need to set out how that will be funded. This is a government that has made its choice. It is right to means test the winter fuel payment because millionaires should not be receiving it. And if the party opposite doesn't know what its policy is on this, it won't on anything else either.
Blair McDougall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I haven't met anyone who thinks that millionaires should get the winter fuel payment, perhaps other than John Swinney. But I did meet a lot of constituents who felt the threshold was too low, and the government has recognised that today. However, the Minister knows better than most that while some pensioners do still struggle, pensioner poverty has fallen in recent times, whereas child poverty has gone in the opposite direction. Will he use some of that nearly £500 million which has been saved from this measure to direct it towards the grandchildren rather than the grandparents, and to where poverty is most acute in our society?
Minister.
Well, again, as always, I thank my honourable friend for his well-put thoughts. He is absolutely right that pensioner poverty has fallen significantly, halving under the last Labour government before unfortunately rising by 200,000 under the party opposite. But we mustn't be complacent about that headline of falling pensioner poverty, because there are wider problems. Well, I'm glad the honourable member welcomes it, because the point I was coming on to is the stagnating incomes of working-age households under the last Labour government moved across to stagnant incomes for pensioners, and no falls in absolute poverty for pensioners under the party opposite. And there are also subsets of pensioners where we do see lasting problems in terms of single pensioners, private renters and others. So I think it is important to see it in the round. But he's absolutely right to say that we must move further on child poverty. You'll have seen the announcement in England on free school meals last week, with consequentials for the devolved administrations, and we will come forward further with a child poverty strategy soon.
Will Forster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do welcome this government's U-turn. Countless pensioners in Woking have suffered last winter. I'm pleased that won't continue. The Minister stated that £36,000 is the threshold he has chosen, the government have chosen, because that is the average earnings. Will the government commit to increasing that threshold going forward when average earnings rise?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his question. It's an important one. So there's always a judgment in choosing a threshold for any means-tested benefit, and I want to be completely straight with the House about that. We've chosen a threshold that will ensure that pensioners, that the threshold is well above the income level of pensioners in poverty, and will also ensure that over 3/4 of pensioners will be receiving the benefit of winter fuel payment in England and Wales. He is right that it is currently in line with average earnings. I think it's important for clarity for pensioners, the point his own spokesperson made just now, that we will be leaving the 35,000 threshold at the level of it is, as all thresholds in the income tax system are frozen for the coming years, so that pensioners know that that is the threshold, so there's no surprises that come, and the decisions about future uprating will be for future budgets.
Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I very much welcome the Minister's statement today. It's the right thing to do to lift pensioners out of poverty. And I'm sure that both he and the Chancellor also agree that it's right to lift children out of poverty. So can he reassure this House that he and the Chancellor are doing all they can to outline plans to lift the two-child cap on universal credit as soon as possible?
Minister.
Well, as my honourable friend knows, we've said clearly that all levers to reduce child poverty are on the table. The child poverty strategy will be published in the autumn, but we're not waiting for that. We've already seen action, as I said earlier, on free school meals. It's another reason why we do need to see more support for energy bills, in particular for insulating homes, because if we look at who is struggling most, having to turn off their heating, it is actually younger families with children that are struggling with that. So she's absolutely right to raise this issue. It is one of the core purposes of this government. We cannot carry on with a situation where large families, huge percentages of them, are in poverty.
Simon Hall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I assume because the Minister can't find the word sorry in his vocabulary this afternoon, he will still expect pensioners in North Dorset and elsewhere to be saying thank you to him for this screeching U-turn. But just a few weeks ago, what he has announced today was predicted to be financial Armageddon. When should the City of London, mortgage payers and everybody else now expect the run on the pound, which was predicted by the Leader of the Commons?
Minister.
Well, what this government is doing is sorting out the public finance mess left by the party opposite. What we are doing is not repeating their irresponsibility. All other parties opposite oppose all of the tax rises set out in the autumn budget, yet claim they support the spending on the NHS, on pensions, and they cannot have it both ways. The party of Liz Truss has not learnt its lesson.
Catherine Atkinson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, no one that I've spoken to in Derby thinks that millionaires should be receiving the Winter Fuel Allowance. But many will welcome the lifting of the threshold so that more people receive it. Would the Minister agree that this shows government listening, it shows money being targeted at where it's needed, and it shows what can be done with a stable economy?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is completely right. As I say, we've set the threshold at a level that means the vast majority of pensioners, not just in her constituency, but right the way across England and Wales, will receive support in the coming winter. And importantly, we're announcing it now to make sure that those payments can be made in time for this winter.
Brendan O'Hara.
Speaker, last year, when the Chancellor slashed the winter fuel allowance, she told us it was both necessary and urgent and the responsible thing to do. Turns out, Madam Deputy Speaker, it wasn't necessary or urgent or the responsible thing to do after all. So is he going to apologise to those millions of pensioners who were put through the ringer so cruelly and so unnecessarily? I think he knows that they deserve an apology from this government. And having performed one U-turn, will they now do the same for the country's poorest families and abolish the two-child cap?
Well, I thank the member opposite for his question. I've just referred to the progress that does need to be made, not just in England and Wales, but in Scotland on reducing child poverty. We'll be setting out that strategy in the coming months, and he's absolutely right to say that we should all want to see very significant progress on that in the years ahead. When it comes to the winter fuel payment in England and Wales, obviously the equivalent benefit is devolved in Scotland, so that's a question for ministers in Edinburgh.
Pamela Nash.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the decision today and I'm delighted to hear this announcement from the Minister. And this is clear, let's be crystal clear, this is a direct result of the progress that this Labour government is making in turning around our economy. But for my constituents, however, the future of the winter fuel payment or the equivalent lies in the hands of the Scottish Government. Can the Minister confirm that the Barnett consequentials to Scotland as a result of today's announcement will exceed what Scottish Government is already planning to spend on their equivalent of the Winter Fuel Allowance, and join me in urging the Scottish Government to follow suit and ensure that the additional funds that are provided due to today's decision will restore the winter fuel payment to all of those who need it and not to those who do not.
Order! Please be seated. I don't need any help in managing the chamber, but questions need to be short. Minister, let's have a sharp answer.
Well, my short answer is that wages have grown in the first 10 months of this government faster than in the first 10 years of the party opposite. Interest rates have been cut by 4 times, so she's absolutely right to say progress is being made, and that needs to be continued, and we need to ensure that more people feel the benefits of that growth in their pockets, and the changes we're making to winter fuel payments today are one of those, and I can confirm that there will be a block grant adjustment exactly as she sets up.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I appreciate this has been a humiliation for the Chancellor and her credibility is intact. No wonder she's not here today to announce her own U-turn. But now that she and the government has got a taste for climb down, can I urge them through the Minister, who unfortunately drew the short straw today, to reverse the equally ridiculous national insurance contribution rises, which is destroying jobs, and the inheritance tax changes, which is destroying farms and family businesses?
Minister.
Well, it's usual for a minister to stand up and thank the honourable member for their question, but I actually mean it in this case, because she completely proved my point that this is a party opposite that has learnt no lessons whatsoever, that thinks it can come to this chamber, call for more spending, oppose every tax rise and expect to ever be taken seriously again. They will not.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a Labour MP who voted against the winter fuel payment cuts, I very much welcome this change in position, but can I urge the Minister and the Government to learn the lessons of this? And one of the lessons is listen to backbenchers. If the Minister and the Government listen to backbenchers, that can help the Government get it right, help the Government avoid getting it wrong. And so what we don't want is to be here in a year or two's time with a Minister sent to the dispatch box after not listening to backbenchers on disability benefit cuts, making another U-turn again. Listen now, and we can help the Government to get it right.
Well, it's important to listen to backbenchers, to frontbenchers. It's even important to listen to members opposite on occasion, particularly when they're digging their own grave in terms of their party policies. But much more seriously, the point the honourable member raised is important, which is everybody on this side of the House wants to make sure this is a fairer country, that is growing again, that wages are growing, that poverty is falling, that inequality is coming down. That is what we need to deliver. Sometimes that will involve tough choices, including all the ones the lady opposite opposes, and those will need to be made because we're a party of government, not a party of protest, but we're in the interests of our values and of a fairer country and a fairer Britain.
Saki Bhatti.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister comes to this House almost triumphantly after having voted to take away this winter fuel cut minimum months before winter, and now he says that we should be thanking him for this reinstatement. Anguish, anxiety, uncertainty, that's what my pensioners suffered. Will you apologise?
Minister.
Well, I mean, he's trying to put words in my mouth that he won't succeed. We have been very clear. What I said in my statement is that we've come to the House today, before the summer recess, particularly to deal with the issue he's raising, which is to provide absolute certainty for pensioners in England and Wales that they will be receiving the winter fuel payment this winter if their incomes are below £35,000. I agree with him. That is a really important level of certainty to provide, and that is why I'm here today.
Sorry. Another reminder for colleagues, questions must be short, as must answers, otherwise many colleagues, many will be disappointed. Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I share the deep concerns of my constituents about the loss of winter fuel payment, which the Minister would know I relayed to the Department. I'm glad that the Government has acted on these concerns and reviewing the threshold so that the majority of pensioners will receive the payment this winter again. Does the Minister agree that in stabilising the economy, we are now in a better position to do what the Labour governments have always done best, protect the vulnerable in our society?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I mean, that is exactly the point I've just made, that what are Labour governments here for? Building a fairer Britain. What did the last Labour government do? Bring down child poverty, halve pensioner poverty, raise wages year after year after year, and that is what this government will do again.
Alison Bennett.
Speaker, I've listened to the Minister's statement and read the words too, and nowhere in that can I see an explanation of why this decision has come now, 11 months after it was first announced last July. So I asked the Minister, why has this decision come now? And will we have to wait another 11 months for the government to rethink its cuts to the disability benefits?
I thank the honourable lady for her question. I've just set out in my response to the honourable member why we're making this announcement now, which is to make sure that the payments can be made in time for this winter. I've not hidden from the fact that we've made a difficult decision last year to means test the winter fuel payment. That is the right choice to have made, but we have listened, and that is why we are setting out a higher means test. I have directly answered the honourable member's question. That is important, but we do need to make some tough decisions. I know the Liberal Democrats want a universal winter fuel payment. They think it's right to pay hundreds of pounds to millionaires. I just take a different view, and I think it's that kind of wishful thinking that created a Liberal Democrat government after 2010 that promised to scrap tuition fees and ended up trebling them.
Christine Sullivan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his statement today, which I know will be greatly welcomed by my constituents in Bathgate and Linlithgow. For over 14 years we became used to a government that didn't listen and didn't change course when circumstances changed. Yep. So I, for one, am grateful that we have a Labour government that does. Whilst there was an uptick in pension credit, will the Minister recommit to working with local government and devolved administrations to increase the numbers of those in receipt of pension credit so that pensioners on lowest incomes don't lose out and get the support they need?
My honourable friend makes a really important point, and whatever the views in this House today, I would say to all honourable members, if anybody has suggestions for ways we can continue to drive up pension credit, making sure the poorest pensioners get the support that they are entitled to, I would always be happy to talk to them.
Judy Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, the Minister's superiors, as my honourable friend from North Dorset ably recalled, told us that there would be a run on the pound unless pensioners took a hit on winter fuel. Since every economic indicator's got worse last year, can he tell us if the pound is safe with this U-turn, or was this just another example of his seniors talking utter bilge to justify their terrible decisions?
I mean, the member opposite is talking bilge. Growth is at the highest in the G7 in the first quarter of this year. Interest rates are down 4 times. Wages have risen faster in 10 months than they increased over 10 years of the party opposite. What is happening is that we're sorting out their mess and putting Britain on a better track.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister agree that with us now being the fastest growing economy in the G7, interest rates being cut 4 times, now is the time to ensure that our public services will be protected? Those rich pensioners who do not need the fuel payment to heat their homes will not get the fuel allowance, but those who do need the winter fuel allowance to heat their homes will.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I feel like I should have gotten out of the way because my honourable friend has given the rebuttal to the honourable lady opposite directly afterwards. He's completely right, but the details of exactly the important points he raises, which is a Labour government investing in public services, ending austerity, that is what we will be in this House on Wednesday hearing about, and I look forward to hearing the party opposite explain how they try to support that spending but oppose every tax rise necessary to make it happen.
Ben Lake.
The Minister's statement this afternoon, not least because it will offer much support and reassurance to so many of my constituents in Ceredigion Preseli. As you will be aware, no system is perfect and mistakes will be made. So can I ask, for those who are entitled but for whatever reason don't receive the winter fuel payment, will there be an appeals mechanism?
Well, I thank my honourable friend and my near neighbour for his question. I mean, no bureaucracy is perfect, but in those cases we don't need an appeals mechanism. We just need to make sure those people receive it absolutely as soon as possible. As I say, we are coming forward with a decision now to make sure that we can automatically pay winter fuel payments to people in receipt of all the benefits I mentioned before, but also who previously received winter fuel payments. And the success rate of that payment mechanism is strong, and that is why I've come forward to make this announcement today. If any honourable members have any constituents in that situation, though, obviously please do get in touch immediately.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the government's decision today and also thank them for listening to people from across the House. Many of my older constituents live in houses that aren't energy efficient, which results in higher bills. So can he say more about what the government is doing to increase energy efficiency in homes, to keep them warmer and bring down bills?
This is such an important point. One of the biggest mistakes we have made in previous decades is to say, oh, we won't see the benefits of work to improve the quality of the housing stock for years, so let's slash it. That's exactly what happened in 2013 when there was a 90% cut in the level of insulations under the eco-scheme, and we're paying for the price for that ever since. This government is not going to make this mistake. My honourable friend, the Energy Secretary, has been ramping up the level of the Warm Homes programme. We need to be out there insulating homes, improving lofts every day until Britain has a housing stock it can be proud of.
Many of my elderly constituents in South West Wiltshire had an unnecessarily cold and miserable winter, and the uncertainty that the Minister constantly refers to was of his government's own making. Will he take this opportunity to apologise to my constituents?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question, but he's right to highlight that we need to be providing support for older people, but actually for all households with their energy bills right through the year, and that is what this government has been doing. We have not been waiting. As I say, the Warms Home discount is being extended to an extra almost 3 million households. We're rolling out the improvements to the insulation programmes I have just mentioned. The Household Support Fund has been extended for future years. That is exactly what we need to do, while at the same time improving our energy security and our energy generation for the future, to make sure that we do not in future see the disaster of the last 5 years, where global wholesale gas prices send electricity and gas prices here in the UK through the roof.
Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank the Minister for his statement today, which will be warmly welcomed by constituents in North Warwickshire and Bedworth, particularly those pensioners that were just above the threshold and lost out last winter. But would he agree with me that it's measures like rolling out free breakfast clubs like the one that I visited this morning at Goodyear's End Primary School that are really making a difference to tackling poverty, and that is what this government is doing across the board in all age groups?
Well, I couldn't agree more with the honourable lady. We need to make sure that we are seeing child poverty fall, that we're seeing extra help for families with food, for free school meals, as well as through the breakfast clubs that she mentions. And we also need to see more progress on pensioner poverty. That's why today we are saying that the threshold level will be well above the levels of incomes of pensioners who are in poverty. We do not want to see that in the years ahead, and that's exactly why we've made this change today.
Claire Young.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. While the government buried its head in the sand, countless pensioners suffered, like my constituent who, despite having a terminal disease, had to cut back on heating and food, spending the winter, I quote, freezing cold. Can the Minister explain why no impact assessments were conducted last year before winter fuel payments were stripped from millions of pensioners?
Well, I thank her for that question, but the equalities analysis was done, and then unusually the poverty impact analysis was also published by over the last year, so I don't agree with the statement she has just made. But she's right to say that we do need to make sure we're improving things for pensioners. As I said before, this government's priority is to keep raising the state pension, and it's to rescue the NHS. As I said, 1 in 5 over 75-year-olds are currently on NHS waiting lists, and the funding to make that happen is only possible because of the tax rises that I stand here week in, week out and hear the Liberal Democrats oppose.
Chris Webb.
I welcome the Minister's announcement today and the changing course from the government. There was many of us that were uneasy about the low threshold for the winter fuel, especially in deprived communities like mine that have got the most deprived borough in the country. So will the Minister ensure my constituents today that all pensioners will automatically receive the new winter fuel allowance and the threshold and won't have to do a single thing in the winter to come?
This is an absolutely crucial point and has been central to the work we've done to decide on the policy today. We want a system that is automatic in the payments, so pensioners do not need to do anything to claim the payments, and is automatic for those who have incomes above £35,000, so they do not have to take action if they need to have the funding recouped, unless they choose to opt out. He's absolutely right. We need a simple system that supports pensions.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do wonder, as the honourable gentleman talks about the NHS, whether he recognises a number of elderly who had to use the NHS as a result of having been cold as a result of his policies. But I want to ask him a very specific question. He said all pensioners with incomes up to and including £35,000 will benefit from this support. He also said individual pensioners with a taxable income above £35,000 will have it recovered through the tax system. What happens where in a household there are two individuals over the age of the winter fuel competency where one earns more than 35 and the other earns less? Will they get some, all or half of it?
I thank the honourable lady for her question. I think I've answered this question, but I'm happy to lay it out again if that's helpful. There's a long-standing principle, I think supported by all parties in this House, of individual taxation. So for those families where a couple, for example, when they're not receiving a means-tested benefit, they will each receive half of their household's winter fuel payment, and then whether they continue to keep that or it's recouped through the tax system will be based on their individual taxable income. So for example, if one, in the situation she's raising, has an income of above £35,000, that will be recouped by HMRC automatically, but if the other one has an income level below £35,000, they will retain the winter fuel payment. I hope that clarifies it.
Polly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if my honourable friend would help me clear up something. The parties opposite seem to claim that they urged us to make this decision, but that's not true, is it? What could they actually urged us to do was to give winter fuel payments to millionaires at the expense of our public services. Could my honourable friend clear that up?
Well, I can clear it up in the case of the Liberal Democrats and Reform, who have the same policy, and not for the first time, I might add, which does appear to be definitely to pay winter fuel payments to millionaires. I have no idea what the position of the party opposite is, and I've been here for an hour and a quarter, and I've been here for months, when I still over the last 11 months have not been able to fathom what the Conservative Party's policy is. I think the Conservative Party's policy is not to learn any lesson from Liz Truss.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the hokey-cokey nature of this policy, where in the general election that well-known political giant, a Labour spokesman, said that Labour had no plans to change winter fuel, within weeks they had cruelly cut it from millions of pensioners, and 13 months later he is performing this screeching U-turn, can he give an assurance at that dispatch box that this isn't just for this winter, but is for every winter in this Parliament?
Yes, absolutely. I thank my member for the question. The question point raised earlier about certainty for pensioners, I think, is important, which I think is the point he is raising. As I said in response to an earlier question, we're setting the 35,000 threshold so that people are aware of that in the coming months. It's it's a round number, and we don't intend to change that in the years ahead. In the further future, yes, there will be questions about uprating to be taken in the normal way.
Whitto.
I welcome that the government has responded to the huge public pressure and is re-expanding eligibility for winter fuel payments. Now I'm concerned that we're about to make a similar mistake that we once again come to regret by cutting disability benefits. So will the Treasury drop those cuts before they cause harm to our constituents instead of reversing them after the fact? I've listened carefully to what my honourable friend has said on this. To be clear, I'm not asking him to keep the status quo or not to support people into work. I'm simply asking him not to cut disabled people's benefits.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question, and we always have interesting conversations. The Disability Minister will have heard the point that has been raised. All I would gently say is that if we look at the forecast for the numbers of people receiving personal independence payments, those are for the numbers receiving them to continue to grow every single year in the years ahead, after the changes being set out by this government. And that's an important point that does get lost sometimes in this debate.
Ellie Chowns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the government finally listening to the public and doing a U-turn on winter fuel. It is long overdue. But a truly strategic approach to tackling fuel poverty means making sure that every home is affordable to heat, well insulated. So will the government commit to investing in the national asset that is our housing stock and properly funding the Warm Homes programme so that nobody, no pensioner, no child, nobody is condemned to fuel poverty in a cold home?
Yes, that's exactly what we are doing, and we are funding it because we're a government that knows it needs to make difficult decisions and will make them to make sure we can deliver priorities like investing in a better housing stock.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this news that will mean more pensioners in Bracknell Forest receive this important benefit and the government's recommitment to the triple lock. But does the Minister agree that a Conservative party that cannot decide if it supports giving fuel payments to millionaires, cannot decide if it backs the triple lock, can't even decide if Liz Truss is a member or not, has no position governing this country ever again?
Well, obviously I agree with my honourable member in lots of ways, but it's really important to dwell on the point he made at the beginning of his question, which is, as I say, under these changes, the vast majority of pensioners, over 3/4, will be receiving the winter fuel payments this winter. And we can give them that reassurance, which is what we need to provide, that they do not need to do anything for that to happen, and they do not need to do anything even if they are on a higher income.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister's at pains to say that pensioners don't have to do anything to get this payment, but of course pensioners did have to do something. They had to write to, email and call Labour MPs and tell them this cut was wrong. Given the justification Labour MPs gave at the time was the economic circumstances, and that inflation is higher, unemployment is higher and growth is otherwise lower than it was going to be, doesn't he agree that the time for Labour MPs to listen was before the cut, not after?
Yeah. No, because this government was formed on the back of disastrous public finances. The party opposite that announced public spending commitments with not a penny to pay for them. So we are not going to apologise for doing the right thing to put this country back on an even keel.
Sam Rushworth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 3rd of September, I came to this House and I said that I represent England's coldest and snowiest constituency, where people, even on a living wage, can be in fuel poverty, and that includes children as well as pensioners. And that's why, as the Minister knows, I've not only pressed the government for the changes that he's announced today, but also to widen the eligibility criteria of the Warmer Homes Discount Scheme, which is the smartest mechanism we have for tackling genuine fuel poverty. And he's only gone and done both of those things. So can I thank the Minister for listening, not to me, but listening to the people that I represent on that issue? And can I ask him what assessment has been made of the impact of that in lifting children out of fuel poverty?
Well, I obviously thank my honourable friend for his question, but I have to disagree with it, which is I don't deserve any credit for the doubling of the eligibility for the Warm Homes discount. The Energy Minister, who is in her place at the front here, is the one that deserves that. In terms of estimates for fuel poverty, what we know is that we should see over 5 million households benefiting from the Warm Homes discount next year, and that will make a real difference to households right across the country.
Jim Allister.
Thank you. I greatly welcome this overdue U-turn. But if 35,000 is now the correct cap, why then did the government impose misery on millions of pensioners last winter? And isn't the basic element, when you get something wrong, you say sorry? It's not enough to say, oh, look at all the things the Conservative Party did. That's not the point. The point is, this government thinks it's better than everyone else, so why will it not say sorry?
Well, what this government has been getting on with over the course of the last year is providing more support for pensioners, raising the state pension and the triple lock, making sure that extending the household support fund, making sure that we are investing in the NHS, which is the single biggest betrayal of pensioners in England at the current time. That is what we've been getting on with. We've now come forward, recognising that we do support the principle of means testing of the winter fuel payment, but have listened and looked again at the level of the threshold, and that's what I've set out today.
Lizzie Collins.
Speaker. I very much welcome the raising of the threshold for winter fuel allowance. I'm sure, as the Minister knows, this is the concern I had with the means testing, although means testing as a principle is absolutely correct. In Morecambe and Lunesdale, I have an older than average population, so can the Minister assure me that my pensioners won't have to do anything special, any application, or do anything particular to get their winter fuel allowance?
I can absolutely give my honourable friend that reassurance. We want to make sure that the vast majority of pensioners will be able to receive winter fuel payments, and then we want to make that as absolutely easy as possible, and that means making it automatic.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister seems unable to say sorry, but does he at least regret the more than 90,000 more elderly people who went to A&E last winter, as opposed to the year before, the last winter under the Conservative government?
Well, I think we know that over the last few years, as energy bills have risen for all households, far too many people have been struggling right since 2020. That's absolutely right, and that is what this government is focusing on addressing. We need to do that, as I've said, through the Warm Homes discount. We need to do it through the Warm Homes scheme, providing the insulation that the honourable lady opposite mentioned earlier. We need to do it right across the board. In the long run, we need to do it by fixing our broken energy system.
Louise Jones.
As
spoken to many in North East Derbyshire who have acknowledged that whilst we shouldn't give this payment to millionaires, nonetheless have been deeply concerned that the threshold for means testing was too low. Can the Minister reassure my constituents that those who are eligible will not have to apply for this benefit?
I absolutely can. We need to make sure, as I've said, that we need to provide the reassurance that the vast majority of pensioners will receive this support and they will have to do nothing to get it in their banks.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The cut to winter fuel allowance and the subsequent U-turn have caused much anguish, distress and misery to the Parliamentary Labour Party. And judging by the questions from his own backbenches, it seems that we're going to have 2 further U-turns on PIP and on the 2-child benefit cap. So to save his colleagues the anguish, will he let us know now when those U-turns are coming?
Well, what Labour MPs want to see is a Labour government bringing down child poverty, and that's what we're going to do. What Labour MPs want to see is a government that can take the responsible decisions, including difficult ones on tax and on means testing the winter fuel payment, so that we can invest in public services and turn around the disgrace that has become Britain's public realm for far too long.
Alison Hume.
Speaker, I welcome this announcement, as will the 26,000 pensioners in my constituency of Scarborough and Whitby, where we have particularly cold and harsh winters. Can the Minister reassure my constituents that automatic payments will be reinstated and advise if there will be any change to the date on which these payments will be made?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. I'm obviously not going to start adjudicating on who has the coldest constituency in England that she's invited me to get involved in, but the point she raises is really important. It actually hasn't been raised by honourable members yet, so I should spell that out. We will be bringing forward, as I said, the regulations over this summer for the payment of winter fuel payments. That will set the qualifying week for the 15th of September, as in past years, and that means that payments will be made in November and December, as in past years.
John Lamont.
Thank you very much. A shocking 75% of Scottish pensioners said they were left cold in their homes last winter. So does the Minister agree with me that the Scottish Government must use additional funding from today's announcements to ensure pensioners in Scotland receive a winter fuel payment at the same level it was at under the last Conservative Government?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. As I'm sure he is well aware, those are decisions for the Scottish Government. But as I've said earlier in this debate, I've spoken to the relevant ministers in the Scottish Government today. There will be a block grant adjustment to reflect this higher spending in England and Wales, and then those decisions are for the Scottish Government.
Jill German.
Speaker, I thank the Minister for his statement, and I also thank him for the extensive amount of time he spent with the Work and Pension Select Committee last week. Our inquiry on pensioner poverty has found that this issue is multifaceted and complex. So can the Minister assure me that he will work cross-government on a policy that will make sure that pensioner poverty is a thing of the past?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. This is a really important point about the complexity of pensioner poverty. I'll just give one example that doesn't get mentioned in these discussions often enough, which is that the growth rates, the value people are getting, the returns on every pound saved into a private pension needs to be absolutely as strong as possible, because those private pensions are what is supporting the living standards of our pensioners. So we need to have a pension industry focused on driving the best possible value for savers.
Dr Neil Shastrihurst.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And there appears to be universal support for this Damascene conversion by the government. But can they set out, having told pensioners last year that the right course of action was to scrap the winter fuel payment for millions, they now tell them that a means-based system is the right course of action? How can pensioners possibly believe anything the government actually says?
Well, I think did we actually get a Conservative Party policy there? Was the honourable member saying they do support the announcement today? So that's a no. We don't have an answer yet after an hour and 10 minutes about what the Conservative Party's policy is. I can give the honourable member the answer he would like, which is yes, we will provide certainty that this is the policy of this government.
We could have gone faster in the last hour and 10 minutes if the Minister was faster with his answers. Jessica Toll.
I've worked hard with Citizens Advice BCP in my Bournemouth West constituency to get pensioners onto pension credit. But on the doors I've met far too many people, especially single women, who are £1 to even £10 over the threshold for pension credit. So can I welcome the statement and thank the Minister for listening to the concerns of my constituents about the threshold. And does he agree that this policy shows the difference between this government and the last, doing what's necessary to get stability in our economy, what's fair to get money back into our public services, and what's right to protect the vulnerable in our society?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for her question, but can I also particularly thank her for her hard work on driving up take-up of pension credit, because that, forget winter fuel payments, that is a really important lifeline for low-income pensioners. It's worth an average of £4,000 to those receiving it, and far too many are missing out. So thank you to her for that work, and I hope it continues.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today's U-turn is an astonishing victory against the government, whose support has dried up in less than a year in office. When the government announced their cruel cut to the winter fuel payment, costing 64,000 Bradford District pensioners vital support, experts across the country warned that up to 4,000 lives could be at risk as they were forced to choose between heating and eating. So I ask the Minister now, the majority of the winter fuel payment has been restored. Does the government dare to produce a figure for how many pensioners may have lost their lives as a result of the government's choice to remove the winter fuel allowance previously?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. I would say it's a serious matter. There are poorer households of all ages who have been struggling with energy bills in recent years. We do, as all of us across this House, I'm sure, want to see those problems be addressed. We've also seen higher than we'd like increases in food prices over the last few years, and it's lower income households that do spend a higher proportion of their budgets on essentials like food, like energy and like housing. And it's the policy of this government to make sure that we are dealing with all those issues.
Wall.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the median average income of a pensioner in Rochdale is £15,000. That's way below the amount we expect people to live on a national living wage. Yeah. So can I thank today's announcement? And does it prove that the government has listened not just to MPs across there, but MPs in the Labour Party who've pushed for this for so long, and more importantly, that it's listened to pensioners that we represent?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's right to say that we did have to make difficult decisions last year, and I understand that honourable members on this side of the House have raised those with us. That's why we've looked again at the threshold, sticking to the principle of means testing, but setting out a higher threshold so that the vast majority of pensions, over 3/4, will now receive winter fuel payments.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the partial reinstatement of the winter fuel payment. When we met, the Minister and I discussed the cliff edge that existed last winter, and it meant that people in receipt of pension credit could, in some cases, leapfrog the income of people in receipt of a small private pension. Can the Minister indicate whether this new means test that he's talked about today will remove that eligibility cliff edge?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question, and I remember discussing exactly that point with him. What I would say is that all means tests have pros and cons, but by having a much higher threshold, and in particular a higher threshold relative to the actual level of the payment, £100 or £200 being received by individuals. The challenges he's talking about very large unfairnesses where small differences in income lead to large differences in outcomes is far reduced.
Richard Baker.
Deputy Speaker, I used to work for Age Scotland, so can I say how welcome it is that the government have listened to older people's charities with today's announcement, which I understand will mean some £100 million additional funding for these payments in Scotland. Will my honourable friend agree SNP ministers should now rethink their own plans and instead endorse Scottish Labour's plans, first proposed last November, which would mean more generous payments for those pensioners who need them most?
Well, I'm glad to hear my honourable friend's life history in his previous role, and I would say if you look at what charities representing older people have put out over the course of the last few hours, it is encouraging. As I said earlier, Age UK have said it's the right thing to do and something that will bring much needed reassurance for older people and their families.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I appreciate that the Minister didn't get a chance to spend long on the backbenches, such as been his accelerated rise up the ministerial pole. But would he like to spare a thought for his former backbench colleagues and join me in thanking and congratulating that small band of Labour backbenchers who went public and broke cover and opposed this dreadful policy?
Well, I agree with him that we should welcome all Labour backbenchers, because they're the people that go through the lobbies every day to keep a Labour government in place that's saving public services, taking tough but fair decisions on tax opposed by all the parties opposite, rescuing our public services, driving down poverty. That's what a Labour government's about, and that's what everyone in this House agrees about.
Neil Duncan-Jordan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome today's statement. As one of the MPs
that spoke against the decision to means test the winter fuel payment last year. I pay tribute to all those campaigners who've lobbied hard for a change in policy. Does the Minister therefore agree that means testing has once again failed, and effectively what we're seeing today is the return of Labour's commitment to universalism and using the taxation system to get the money back from those who are better off?
I thank my right honourable friend for his question. I think I agree in the sense that the tax system is a progressive tax system, and that is the purpose for which it is being used in this case, to drive fairer outcomes for pensioners, where millionaires do not receive the benefit of a winter fuel payment, but all lower and middle income pensioners do.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Northern Ireland Executive is to receive a consequential budget adjustment. Can I ask the Minister when they will receive that, to make sure that our Northern Ireland pensioners actually get a winter fuel payment in the winter coming? Yeah.
I absolutely recognise the question the honourable member is raising. I've spoken to the Northern Ireland Executive today. He's absolutely right to say that we will make sure that they receive the adjustments to the budget in year to provide the same support in line with the principle of parity under which the social security system in Northern Ireland operates. So the answer is yes, that support and that funding will be there.
John Davis.
Away from the knockabouts of Westminster politics, myself and people in Telford will be welcoming this change. The means testing principle was the right thing to do, but the level was too low. Does my honourable friend agree with me that millionaires and MPs who happen to be pensionable age, together with those people who are living abroad, should not receive this payment?
I almost always agree with my honourable friend, so the answer is yes, and he does give me an opportunity to provide a point of clarification which I've not covered so far in the last hour or so, which is that this payment will continue not to be exportable outside for those not resident in the UK.
Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that those pensioners who missed out on their payment in the winter of 2024 but who would now qualify under the current rules should be reimbursed for the money they lost?
Well, my view is that all pensioners are being supported by our higher level of the basic state pension and the new state pension, supported by the difficult decisions this government has been able to take. All pensioners will be supported by a functioning NHS, which is what we are putting in place after the disgrace of the last 14 years. And directly to his question, we are setting out the system for future years, not for the past.
Douglas McAllister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is very welcome news that will bring even more money to Scotland on top of the record funding settlement our Chancellor delivered in the budget. Does the Minister agree with me that my constituents in Western Bartonshire fear the Scottish Government and John Swinney's plans to pay out just £100 in Scotland? Those who need it most will now get more in England and Wales than the SNP will pay out to pensioners in Scotland. Double, in fact, because they seem determined to pay out to the very wealthiest millionaires in Scotland. Should they rethink this?
Here.
Well, I can't compete with my honourable friend for making a powerful case that the SNP government in Edinburgh does need to think again.
Monica Harding.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my constituency of East and Walton, over 15,500 pensioners lost the winter fuel allowance, of which 5,000 of them were over 80. Would the Minister like to apologise to the gentleman that wrote to me with cancer who couldn't keep his heating on for the winter of worry he put them through?
No, he won't. Well, I thank the honourable member for her question, and she raises an important point, which is particularly for those in need of healthcare, it is important they receive support, because it's not that we see higher levels of challenges of keeping the heating on amongst older generations, it's about the consequences of that, particularly in the kind of case that she has just raised. That's exactly why we do need to make sure that we are turning around the NHS, which all of our constituents, all the constituents of members in England are relying on. It's why we're seeing improvements to waiting times in Wales as well.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his leadership on this issue. If he's looking for examples of how to increase the uptake of pension credit, he's very welcome to visit my constituency, the work that Chai is doing with Gate 55 to maximise benefits. And if he comes along to one of their sessions with the Dove Centre, he can also get a warm meal and a game of bingo. But as a tight-fisted Scotsman, the 35,000 threshold is much more generous than I expected. Can you explain how you reached that value? Thank you.
It's an absolutely fair question, which is all means test thresholds do involve judgments, and I've been completely honest to this House about that. The judgment we have come to is that we want to see the vast majority of pensioners receiving it. We want to be absolutely sure that no lower income pensioners will miss out, and that is what has brought us to a 35,000 threshold, which also means those on higher incomes, the richest 20 or 25% of pensioners, won't receive the winter fuel payment.
James Wong.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister may be in denial, but this U-turn is a humiliation for the Chancellor, who claimed economic stability demanded taking money from vulnerable pensioners, and for all the Labour MPs who voted for it. And why didn't the government listen to those who campaigned against these cruel cuts and do so sooner? And will he now apologise to my constituents and those across the country who were cold this winter?
Well, this is a Chancellor that's brought stability back to the economy, brought growth back to the economy, brought wages growing once again, that's driving investment into our public services, which is going to rescue them, and driven up investment, public investment, which is crucial to showing that once again we're a country that can do the basics like building houses, filling in potholes and the rest.
Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When this policy was originally announced, I and members across this House, and indeed constituents of mine, all shared the same basic view. Means testing is fair, but the threshold was far, far too low. So I welcome the decision taken by the government today and the fact that they are listening. Over the last winter, working with the Citizens Advice Bureau in Hartlepool, we've secured over nearly £1 million of additional annual income for Hartlepool pensioners. Doesn't that show the work that needs to be done with all of those unclaimed benefits not going to the pensioners that need it?
Well, I absolutely want to congratulate my honourable friend on the work that others have been involved in Hartlepool. Driving up the take-up of all benefits, in fact, so people get the support that they are entitled to is really important in making sure that more poor households are able to eat, to heat their homes and to live a decent life.
Pete Wishart.
Speaker, I don't know where Scottish Labour MPs have been for the past 6 months, but the Scottish Government have already made it absolutely and abundantly clear that we will reintroduce a winter fuel payment, and we would have done this with or without their embarrassing screeching U-turn. So here's another place where you could follow the Scottish Government, and that is on the two-child benefit cap. We vow to ensure that that will disappear in Scotland. Will he now make the same pledge across the UK?
Yeah. Well, the honourable member asks where Labour MPs, Scottish Labour MPs have been. I'll tell him, campaigning in Hamilton, making sure there's a Labour MSP, and that in a year's time there'll be a Labour government in Edinburgh once again.
Douglas McAllister.
Oh, no.
Oh. Noah Law.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Away from some of the consternation of this place, a glance at HM Treasury distributional analysis will reveal that the original decision to protect the most vulnerable, the budget that followed, the spring statement, and I hope the spending review too, have been some of the most progressive fiscal decisions we've seen in recent years. So will the Minister join me and the many wealthier pensioners in my constituencies who agree that this is absolutely the right decision to means test, it's the progressive decision and it's the Labour decision?
Well, that is absolutely right, and I think every member around this House will have heard from people on higher incomes who think it makes no sense at all that they're receiving hundreds of pounds from the government each year. And with these sensible decisions to means test, yes, at a higher threshold, we have brought that to an end.
Liz Jarvis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the government's cut to the winter fuel payment was estimated to have impacted 16,766 pensioners in my constituency of Eastleigh, so I welcome today's U-turn. Those affected include my constituent Chrissy, who was just above the threshold, and she now has the added fear that she will lose her PIP payments. Does the Minister understand why Chrissy is so angry and afraid? Yeah.
Well, I thank the honourable lady for her question. I've already discussed with her honourable member behind her this question about people just over the pension credit threshold. I do recognise that. I've obviously spoken to pensioners in that situation myself. As I said, we have listened, and that's why we put in place a much higher threshold. That means that Chrissy, if she was near to the pension credit threshold, will be receiving winter fuel payments this year.
Chris Fitz.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister for his statement, one which pensioners in Harlow will welcome. Fastest growth in the G7, 3 trade deals, 4 interest rate cuts. Is this the context in which the Minister feels we're able to provide more pensioners in Harlow with the winter fuel allowance?
Well, the honourable member, the representative for Harlow, always does a good job of representing it, but also remembering the economic progress that is being made. And if anyone didn't hear what he was just saying, he was just talking about rising growth, rising wages, interest rates falling, a country back on the path to success.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Almost £85,000 was paid out by Dorset Community Foundation in their Surviving Winter campaign, including many in my constituency of Mid Dorset and North Poole. But they've noticed that many more people are relying on oak and liquefied gas, especially those in park homes and rural areas. So what is he doing with his colleagues in Cabinet to push down the price of power for those who don't have choice?
Well, I thank her for that question. It also gives me an important opportunity to praise the work being done by all kinds of charities, in some cases by supporting pension credit uptake, but in some cases, in the case of better funded foundations, actually providing direct support to pensioners. And that is all very welcome indeed. She's absolutely right to raise the question about wider sources of energy, but of course the winter fuel payment is a cash benefit that's able to be used for all kinds of energy.
Chris MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The decision to restore the winter fuel payment to those earning under £35,000 a year is the right decision. And can I thank the Minister and his predecessor for the way that they constructively engage with the representations from my constituents in Stockton, Billingham and Norton over this threshold issue. But does he agree with my constituent who wrote to me and said the winter fuel payment, whilst welcome, is not a silver bullet? And this government's commitment to the triple lock stands in stark contrast to the previous Conservative government's breaking of the triple lock in 2022, which is still costing my constituents hundreds of pounds a year.
Well, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and he's right to say that we should focus on the big changes that we are making to support pensions, and the big ones in England are rescuing the NHS and raising the basic and the new state pension.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his statement to have the threshold raised to 35,000. It means that many will now qualify, and we thank him for that. So I very much welcome the decision to give winter fuel payment back to pensioners. On behalf and for all of those pensioners who have struggled for the last 10 months, will they receive a back pay from government to pay back the credit cards or the loans that they had to take out in order to make it through the last winter, bearing in mind that the cold winter over these last few weeks as well has meant that people are still having to turn their heating on and therefore racking up even more costs. Thank you.
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. What we've been doing is to make sure there was support over the course of the last winter, and we've been making action on that, and you'll have seen the increase in the state pension that happened just at the beginning of April, including to many of his constituents. In future, obviously, the question for the Northern Ireland Executive is how they wish to handle, but under a principle of parity, we would say the same change in Northern Ireland, so his constituents do receive winter fuel payment this winter.
Fred Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I represent over 20,000 pensioners in Plymouth. That's more than a quarter of the people I represent. Hundreds of conversations over the last year. People understand that the winter fuel payment should not have been given out to everyone in society. The richest in society don't need it. And I warmly welcome this policy today announced by the Minister. Can he confirm what are the economic measures that this government have taken that have allowed us now to make this change?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. We've moved from competing over temperatures to competing over volume of pensioners, but both are important. The point he makes, I think, will echo with lots of members around this House who've had similar conversations with pensioner constituents who are, if they're on a higher income, don't think it makes sense for them to be receiving hundreds of pounds from the government every year, and they won't be in future. But the vast majority of pensioners, as I say, over 3/4, will be receiving extra support this winter because of the decision we have announced today.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister agree that it is strong economic foundations that this government has been building, which has enabled us to provide the extra support to pensioners and working people, and that as the economy continues to grow, we must focus ever more political attention and resources on the younger generation, particularly people starting their careers, and perhaps one day they may have a triple lock?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He raises a really important point, which is as economic growth returns, as it has over the course of recent months, what matters is that that growth feeds through to rising living standards, and that it feeds through to rising living standards, particularly for poorer and middle-income households. And we need to be honest about this. The reason why wages did not grow under the last government is because growth was not there, and that is exactly what we need to make sure never happens again.
Final question, Lindsay Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in Amber Valley are people of common sense, so they tell me that they don't think millionaires should get the winter fuel allowance. However, they did feel that the threshold was too low, so no doubt they will welcome today's announcement. But after 14 years of being let down by the Conservatives, they are wary of government announcements. So can the Minister reassure my constituents that support for pensioners by way of the triple lock, pension credit and NHS investment will remain?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question, and she's absolutely right that faith in the system has been strained by the failure of the last 14 years, an economic failure, public service failure, failure of basic behaviour in politics, and that is what we need to turn around. But what she can say to her constituents is that wages are growing, pensions are rising, waiting lists are falling, Britain is back.
That's the end of the statement, and I'll allow the front benches a moment to shuffle over.